Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Graban. Our guest today is Rob Dorgan. He's had many careers. We were introduced by a mutual friend here in the Cincinnati area, by the way. But Rob has worked as a paralegal. He taught Western civilization at the nearby University of Cincinnati. He started a retail store and was president of a manufacturing company. But nowadays, he's got many roles and titles. He's a licensed massage therapist. He's a certified yoga educator, an international retreat facilitator, a meditation teacher and devotee, and a practicing astrologer. And Rob is also the author. People watching on YouTube can see the cover behind him, author of the book, Awakening the Mystic, a novel of cosmic love and healing. So Rob, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Good, Mark. Thanks so much. Yeah, I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. I think there's a lot of things we'll talk about, and we'll see where the conversation takes us. We'll certainly talk about your book and other recent things. But to tee that up, I'm really curious. The main question we always start off with here, Rob, what's your favorite mistake?
I love the question. And when we first talked about it, I took some time to really think about that, because I guess we all feel like we've made several mistakes in our life. Mm-hmm. But I think my favorite mistake, which might sound a little odd, but it was going to Europe while I was working on my PhD. Mm-hmm. So it's like, how can that really be a mistake, right? But that's right. Kind of one of the things that propelled me forward into the life that I'm in now, because I was on a set track. And one of the summers while I was working on my PhD program, a friend of mine and we decided that we would just take the summer and we would go to Europe. Well, I'd been studying Western civilization, Western history, modern Europe. So I was excited to see all the things in Europe that I'd finally studied about, Right. And so went to Europe, but what I didn't expect, hanging out with other academia people and also artists and all that for these months, was they have a little bit of a different lifestyle. It's a little bit more relaxed in Europe, even back when I was there with them, and not taking it so seriously like we do, like Americans do, like climbing that ladder is the only goal. And I was so intense at that part in my life anyway, that when I got there, I just felt myself really relaxed with these people and started asking questions about, and they're like, well, we have holidays and we make sure we take them and all of this. And it really impacted the way I started to look at my life and what I was doing. So in a way, it was my favorite mistake because it totally altered my life path and what I was going to do. So I could see where the expectations of a trip like that were different than what really happened. But I'd love to hear more. I mean, it doesn't sound like it didn't derail your PhD studies. It seems you ended up teaching here at UC. Did it take a while for some of the full impact of that to affect you? Well, no, it was pretty immediate. I never finished my PhD. I have a master's degree. Okay. I was supposed to be there for 3 months over the summer. I ended up staying 4 months. And back then, with no cell phones, I could get away with calling the office at night for answering machines and saying, I'm staying longer to my professors, When I came back, the motivation that I had before was just not quite there. So that trip really did alter things. I mean, that's when I basically stopped the PhD program. I went on what I thought was going to be a temporary leave of absence, which ended up being a permanent leave of absence for the program. But I had already been teaching with my master's degree, and I could teach history with that credential. Yeah. So that's how I taught. But it just shifted the way I thought about what I wanted to do with my life. I'd had a little bump in the road when I was a paralegal, thought I was going to go to law school. And
was that before your PhD studies? I'm sorry.
It was.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, I was set to work for a large law firm here. All I had to do was go to law school, but I just wasn't sure it was going to work for me. So a college professor of mine said, hey, I've got this program at UC. It's studying history. You love history. Why don't you try that out and see how things go? So I wasn't sure if it was a stepping stone or what, but I also love teaching. But that trip really did. I mean, I guess I can look at it as derailing or my goal, where I was headed. But at the same time, it altered it in some really interesting ways for me. It opened me up to, honestly, Mark, I realized that I couldn't keep that type A energy going very long. I was getting really burnt out already.
Yeah. And maybe that's my type A personality, choosing a word like derail. There's a certain, didn't mean that to sound.
Oh, no, not at all.
Negative about your decision there.
Oh, no, believe me. The feedback I got from like family and all that, they were like, what are you doing? First, you're not going to law school. Now you're not going to finish your PhD. You know, I mean, my family was supportive in the long run or whatever, but they also just saw, you know, like thought I had this bright future in what we would consider like traditional pathways, whether, you know, being a lawyer or a professor, that kind of thing. And I basically changed my mind.
Right. I mean, did you give any consideration to moving to Europe and teaching there, kind of in that more relaxed environment? Because people that you were around, I'm sure were finishing or had finished their degrees and were teaching and enjoying the balance of life there.
A very good point. I really tried hard to get there. Yeah. But it just wasn't as easy, you know, because, you know, my specialty was not as needed in Europe as it was here. Yeah. So I was either going to have to change directions. And again, I just was thinking that, you know, I needed a different path, basically. Sure. But now I've been to Europe a lot. So since then, I mean, I tried to go back every year, even if it was just for a short time. But now I've done several retreats in Europe, in Ireland. So, and that has used my master's degree in English and Irish history. So,
So what countries did you visit during that trip? And were you backpacking all over, or was it a certain country?
Yeah, I did the typical thing back then where I had the Eurail pass, started in Greece and worked my way up through Italy and went to Switzerland, Austria, into France, eventually ending up in Ireland and then England, because my my concentration is in that area of modern European history.
Okay. So you came back, you were teaching, and then, I mean, some of the other career steps, it would just be interesting to hear kind of the progression of, starting the retail store. And then, since I'm particularly interested as an engineer, I started my career started in manufacturing. You know, how you ended up becoming president of a manufacturing company, which seems like a very type A kind of, traditional management career path or job.
Yeah, definitely it was. And I had what I kind of termed it, like from the late 80s until like the mid to late 90s, I was on a sabbatical. You know, like I was studying yoga and astrology and all these things. The store was kind of like the retail store that I had was kind of like an offshoot of all of that. All my different interests rolled together. And then a friend of mine started his own manufacturing company. And it was perfect because he was importing marble from Italy. We were doing artwork on it. I could use my background for the design part of it. And in that job, at first I wasn't sure that that's what I wanted to do, but it was a small enough company that when I went in, I started off as the production manager, then moved up to the sales manager. Then eventually I took over as the president. But it was a little different because of the art feel to it. Sure. And what's funny in that situation, I was the most structured type A person in the company compared to my friend who owned the company.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's a matter of circumstances and and perfect fit, not the type of thing where you were applying for jobs at various manufacturing companies, or would have even ever, sounds like you would have never wanted to work at some other different manufacturing company that was tied into other interests and knowledge. Yeah.
Probably not, because I was also offering yoga classes to the staff.
Mm-hmm.
And we would do little short meditations in our morning meetings, just to get people calmed down. I was using a lot of the stuff that I had learned on my sabbatical,
Sure,
to run this company, and it worked out really well for me. So that was good. It was really good.
Did your own practice of, let's say, yoga and meditation in particular, help you be a better leader in that business, do you think?
Absolutely. Let me just say this, is that I had played with meditation in the 80s, because I was really high strung.
Mm-hmm.
Like going to doctors because I had nervous tension.
Mm-hmm.
I was having a lot of physical issues that back then I didn't realize that it was stress related. If back in the day where I'm talking about, we weren't seeing articles on how stress can affect your body, or not as much as we have now.
Right.
So I had no idea that I was drinking too much coffee to get through the day, and that I was, just so stressed and never relaxing. And that's when I went to Europe and I relaxed and decompressed, that I was like, oh my God, this is different. Mm-hmm. So I took all of that I was learning into my corporate job. But at one point with that is, that corporate job was really, really important to me at that juncture. Taking those practices, like you said, into that job was great, because I also think if I had not gone back to a professional career, I would have had a huge case of FOMO. Mm-hmm. I would have thought that I missed out on something by not trying to do that.
That might have been a mistake.
Yeah.
Not
right.
Yeah.
So I did it for 12 years.
Okay. That's a significant amount of time. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And I actually was surprised myself that I stayed so long, but doing it differently. I'm not saying there wasn't stress. At times, of course there was, but I felt like that I was encouraging people to look at the way they dealt with stress differently. And so I was doing the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think these topics are much more accepted in the business world, or maybe in American society in general. Thinking of my first job, and I've talked about it in some episodes, not to get too derailed on it, but 30 years ago June, so let's call it 30 years ago, came to this General Motors environment, high stress, poor performing plant, high stress. Yeah. Leaders yelling and screaming, and their biggest idea of stress relief was probably cigarettes and alcohol, probably out, at the end of the day, cigarettes during the day, alcohol at the end of the day. And, that was not exactly a typical workplace circa 1995, but, I know some manufacturing leaders today who are much more open of, for one, sharing emotions and feelings, not just anger, but trying to deal with business pressures in a way that's less harmful for everybody involved. Because there's the connections between certainly a lot of studies I've seen about the connections between emotional workplace stress and physical health, not just the classic someone has a heart attack because of the work stress, but all sorts of other illnesses and diseases that seem pretty well correlated to workplace stress and anger.
And it's interesting that you say that, because I don't think we realize what is stress related. Yeah. Because stress comes on so slowly that it becomes your normal, and you don't remember life without that kind of stress. Mm-hmm. You start to be able to take a boss who's screaming at you all the time, and you think you're dealing with it, but it's still affecting you. Yeah. So I think things are different. I am now, and I think it has to do with my background with the master's degree and being the president of a company, because I do use that in my marketing. But without naming any names, especially here in town, I've worked with a lot of big companies where they'll bring me in for either a session or two to talk about natural stress relief through meditation or breathing, a little bit of stretching. My forte, if I can toot my horn here, is just that I'm a very practical person. And I think also because of the backgrounds that I have, and especially with the teaching, it's like if you don't make it accessible, people just shut down on it, right? And so if you get too out there and esoteric about it, and I mean, there is a level of that you can go to if that's what you want. But for those of us like working in the everyday environment, just figuring out how to breathe deeper, how to make some habits out of just relaxing during the middle of your day actually makes you more productive and creative.
Yeah. Well, so then you can make that business connection, if not a business case. You know, somebody might ask, what's the ROI of meditation? And that's probably not so easy to answer, but the business benefits there around creativity, innovation, problem solving, business performance seem pretty clear.
And people showing up more.
Yeah.
Because if they're healthier, they're not calling in sick as much.
Or even the quote unquote mental health day, which some people take issue with that term and throwing that around a little too loosely. But yes, the idea of stress or just saying, well, I can't deal with work today.
Yeah.
Not coming in.
And I think that the corporations are actually seeing it. And I say that because they're bringing us in more often to do sessions. I was with one large company for 5 years on a weekly basis. And I mean, first of all, besides the stress relief for the people who attended the class, it also gave them a feeling of being taken care of by their company. And that is also a huge component of it. I mean, we all want to feel connection. And if we're spending 30 years, let's just say, if we're going to dedicate 30 years to a company or whatever, we really kind of want to feel like we're partnering with them in some way, and that they're taking care of us as we take care of them. So offering those things, I think, it also really helps. Yeah.
So I imagine, I wonder what prompts, or do you know what prompts? I imagine companies there's executive somewhere has got some interest in those ideas and they find you. I imagine you're not, it wouldn't be a good use of your time to go cold calling random companies to see if you can tell them on this, that they're exposed to some ideas and they find you as a local expert. Do you have a sense of how that happens?
It's happened in a couple of different ways. The very first one with the company that I was with 5 years, I was teaching a large class, a public class, and I had no idea, but the CFO of this particular company was in the class. I mean, I wouldn't know. And it was her first yoga class, and I kept going over to her, and while I was instructing everybody, and I would just say, try this. She's like, and she looks at me and she goes, I'm type A. I'm a CFO for a company. This is not easy. I said, just take a deep breath. I got you. Anyway, through that one class, then she had somebody call me, and the next thing you know, I'm with them for 5 years. So there was that. Yeah. But then word kind of spread through that network that, you know, and again, I think my background really kind of helped. You know, I go in and what I say to these people, you know, like if I've got a huge screen of 100 or more people that are in meditation, I say, the first thing I want to tell you is I understand you. I have been where you are. I've had sales goals. I've had pressure, you know, and I think a lot of times that helps to get the point across, because then they trust me that I'm not just somebody who for my whole life has just been sitting on some cloud meditating. And you know what? I'm not bashing that. If somebody can do that, go for it. Right.
Well, there's a different perspective to say, like, well, let's say if, you know, your background had been, you've been teaching yoga for 30 years, you've been a business owner with a yoga studio or a shop, or that's different than being a production manager and president of a manufacturing company.
Right.
Or people can relate to that then.
They can. And I mean, it actually helps me on these small retreats that we do, like in Hawaii or Florida or Ireland. Yeah. Most of the people that A lot of the people that we attract to those kinds of retreats are corporate types. And they come because they've heard about us from somewhere, or they had a couple sessions through their company and they like their jobs, but they're stressed out.
Yeah.
And they know there's a better way. So they come on a week-long retreat or a 5 or 6 day retreat, whatever it is that they can manage, to just find some skills for themselves to use. And sometimes then they use it for their employees.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's some good opportunities there. And, it makes me reflect on, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, or I'll share a little bit of experience of trying to figure out some of the, the mind-body connection with yoga, where my wife is a corporate executive, has practiced yoga very consistently for 20 years. Like, she used to go to studios, take classes. She learned enough where, she pretty much, relies on a video maybe for prompting, but, she knows what she's doing and has had seen such benefits. And I was very reluctantly, she strongly encouraged me to try to explore this.
yeah.
I was skeptical, reluctant. And, I think, in COVID times, it was a combination of COVID era stresses, business stresses that came from all of that. Some discomfort with one organization that I was working with that I think was causing additional stress. And I think it was all manifesting into a lot of really weird back pain. Back movement issues where, long story short, of a physical therapist saying, that's weird. I don't know, physical therapists I think have seen it all, like in terms of I couldn't roll over in bed without a lot of effort. If I was horizontal, I was a mess. But if I was vertical or seated or there's this very strange set of circumstances. And what I learned was not dabbling with yoga, but the daily practice of very slow yoga was, made it more, there's certainly a meditation benefit. I couldn't just sit and meditate. I tried that and I struggled with it. And, but holding a yoga pose for 60 seconds or 90 seconds before moving to the next one created both some physical stillness and mental stillness. And, the daily regular practice, when I finally got to it, I think started making an impact in a way the physical therapist wouldn't have predicted. And I removed myself from that workplace situation. And some of the COVID stuff was easing up. So the problem, I think, in trying to understand what happened is that there were multiple things going on where it's hard to point to say, to ask which factor made the biggest difference. So I'm asking you to guess maybe, but what's your guess about some of the connections from your experiences?
So I'm wondering, and first of all, I want to say consistency is the big deal. It's not how much you do or how long you do it, but it's doing it every day.
Whether it's
whether it's the asana or the body movement part, or if it's sitting in meditation. Now, historically, thousands of years ago, the research was you do yoga poses to get your body to be comfortable to be able to sit in meditation. But how I came to it was the same way. I could not sit still back in the day. But I got into yoga through a recommendation from somebody that was like, you are going to burn out. Okay. And so I started doing the yoga and I did it consistently. And pretty much like you talked about with your wife, I went to studios all the time and I studied with different teachers. And what's ironic is locally here in Cincinnati, we have Lilias Folan, who was on PBS for years.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And when I was a little kid, I remember doing her stuff. And so once I realized that, I was like, oh, I've kind of done this as a child. This is kind of cool. But I realized the same thing. And so my yoga practice was my meditation practice too, because I was very much like what you're describing. But what I wanted to say about that, where you're saying like multiple things about your situation is, I just wonder, like with my life, the consistency of the yoga made me more reflective on what I wanted. So maybe getting rid of the client, suddenly it wasn't as important, that you became important to yourself. Getting rid of the back pain knowing it with self-confidence that you'd find another client.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the mind takes us into all those things like, well, I can't let this client go and blah, 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 blah. It's like, but if you think about it and they're affecting your health, So that's kind of my take on your situation.
Yeah.
And I do think that when we are unhappy and we're stressed out, it manifests in our body. It creates dis-ease, which becomes disease.
Yes.
And that is definitely one of the things that kicked my butt into chilling out more, because I wanted to live longer.
Right.
I was in my 20s and felt like I was like an old man. So,
Well, I'm glad you were able to make that adjustment and
you too.
Pursue some other paths. So I would love to talk about your book and talk about the path of writing and bringing a book to light. So I'm going to put you into full screen. I did that. Oops, I did that wrong. I made a mistake. I was trying to put your camera into full screen so we could see the book behind you. But tell us the story behind the book. Okay, that we've got it in the screen. I'm going to stop clicking buttons and so I'm doing, practice these things. I made a mistake. Awakening the Mystic. Tell us about the book and kind of the story of, I always love to ask authors, what was the inspiration? How did it come to be?
Well, I was teaching in Hyde Park. There's a studio up there that I was actually co-teaching a teacher training program. And lots of people are now taking these trainings, whether they ever want to teach yoga or not. It's just like a year-long program that they just dive in. And I was teaching one of those, and I was driving Columbia Parkway. So again, here's a Cincinnati reference. And I just had this inspiration about a story that was somewhat related to the philosophy of yoga, but it was dramatic all at the same time. Now, I have written a lot over the years, thesis, all this kind of stuff, papers, but I never really thought I was going to write a book. But this idea just grabbed me. I started typing and I started writing, and I ended up in a 2-year period, not knowing I was writing a book. I wrote over 220,000 words.
Oh my, that's a lot.
It is a lot. Yeah. So the inspiration came because I was doing this teacher training. So the story is there's some memoir in there. Like if your viewers read the book, they're going to hear about a yoga teacher who used to be a college professor. There's some of that in there.
Sure. Okay. It's not an autobiography, but
it's not at all. No. And you'll know that by chapter 5. Okay. You'll be like, wow. Okay. Different name, everything. But there are some, I think most writers have some part of their lives, of course, in there. I mean, how else can you write? But this came out a little memoir but it is the story of this guy who's basically on a spiritual adventure for himself. And he is fairly practical, and he is teaching people about meditation and yoga, but it takes him through all the nuances of his life, like facing an old religion that he thought he'd let go of when he got into yoga, facing some past decisions that he made in his life to be able to move on, like regret that he had. But it's very adventurous. I sometimes when I describe it, I'm afraid it's sounding kind of dry, but I have people now, since it's been out, who know nothing about yoga or meditation or astrology. And they say they learn a lot, but they also don't need to know. There's also a glossary in the back with lots of the words to help you out. But the story came from an inspiration on Columbia Parkway. And it just went from there, and it kept coming. And I think, going back to my original point about changing my life through relaxation, I was able to go with it because I'd never had that kind of creativity. I've been creative in a lot of ways, but never like that, where I was driven to write this story, to edit it, to put it out there. And I think because of my past being, the relaxation and the self-reflection and questioning, I think it made it possible for me to do that. So does that answer that pretty good?
Yeah. And I imagine, or I hope, you were able to find a balance between the need to have some drive to, because a book is a big undertaking, not just to do the writing, but then, maybe the worst part is of being an author is reading your own writing and then having to edit and bring it to production and not have a forever half-finished book, like balancing the drive it took to make that happen, to get it across the finish line without creating undue stress.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I had to call myself back to my practices. I was having chronic shoulder stuff go on. And
not
it was because
computer time, but no.
Yeah. And what I realized, it was because I was typing. I mean, for almost 2 years, I was always on my computer, and then working with the editor from the publisher, she wanted, and I was like, I just do one more. I was like, get up and do some yoga, counterbalance all this forward motion. So we're always reminding ourselves of what's good for us.
Yeah.
I mean, and even in that case, here I am writing a story about a yoga teacher, meditation teacher, and I'm getting all caught up in the swirl of getting this thing done, So it was pretty interesting to call myself back on it.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. And there's a couple concepts from the book that might be interesting to touch on. If I'm saying this correctly, is it kleshas?
Kleshas.
Kleshas.
Yeah, that's okay.
I'm a kleshas. What are kleshas?
Well, in yoga philosophy, it's said that there are 5 things that hold us back from living our life fully. Okay. The first one is just ignorance. And that can be ignorance in a lot of ways. If we don't educate ourselves, if we don't meet different types of people, if we just stay closed in. I mean, I'm generalizing. There's lots of philosophy on these. But then the second one they say that gets in our way is ego. Okay. And I think in my case, that's what was in my way about making big changes. Or it could have been in your case when you were talking about giving up a client. The ego gets in there. I can do this. Well, yeah, you can probably, but
I can make it work. I can
do this.
It out. Yeah.
But is it the best thing for you?
Right.
Then the third and fourth one work pretty much together, and it's your attachment to things, maybe the way you think, your habits that you won't let go of, and aversion. So those two come down to, if you just think about it, we're constantly judging, and we don't need to. You see somebody outside and you're like, oh, they look good. Oh, they look this. And you have this whole conversation because they're based on your attachments and aversions, whether you like something or you don't like something. And it really is a waste of our energy. And then the fifth one of the kleshas is our fear. Mostly it's about our mortality. Once we really understand, okay, we are finite, and this is the way it's going to be, and we kind of look that boogeyman in the face, that fear, we can live a little bit more because maybe we make more decisions that are good for us,
Yeah.
But fear in general. So those are the 5 things that the yoga philosophy has said that get in our way from really living our life fully.
Yeah. And it sounds like aversion and fear are probably tightly connected. We have an aversion to bringing up a certain topic. It may be that we fear the reaction or fear what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or our attachment also, because we may be so attached to our opinion that we think everybody else is wrong without ever just opening some space to actually listen to where they're coming from. I mean, we see that, a lot.
Yeah. Which sounds like, again, connections to ego, which could combination of ignorance and ego could lead to an aversion.
Absolutely.
To challenge things, to learn, to change your mind.
I mean, that's one thing. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's one thing in modern life. Like, it seems like sometimes there's no worse thing, especially like in the realm of politics, that I'm not really involved in, but just as a voter and an observer, like the worst thing ever is like, people get attacked for changing their minds.
Yeah. Yeah.
And why is that not a sign of being reasonable, intelligent, adaptable? You learn something new and you change your mind. I would celebrate that, but.
Exactly. Then we go back to the first one, which is called avidya, or ignorance. Somebody educates themselves and they're like, wow, and I'm opening myself up to something different. I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a difference between someone wavering back and forth all the time, trying to make everybody happy. But when somebody on a deeper level is like, wow, I really looked this and I've moved on from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think they were onto something 2,500 years ago when they wrote all this down.
Yeah.
And it amazes me because I'm thinking 2,500 years ago, as humans, we were all worried about what we were going to eat and where we were going to sleep. You know what I mean? And they're working on a philosophy like this. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Then one other thing I wanted to ask you about, the idea of an inner council, and it's like city council, not legal counsel, like an attorney. What is an inner council? Is that one of the strategies or a mindset even that helps us kind of try to reduce those kleshas in our life?
It is. So now I'm going to ask your audience to open their mind a bit, especially if they're not into astrology. The council is actually based on this main character's astrological chart. And what I did was I personified all the planets into gods and goddesses. And they're all trying to help this guy understand his journey. They're all helpful. But there's a goddess in there that's very angry. There's some loving energy. Anyway, it's like in astrology, everybody has one planet, one planetary energy that actually leads their chart.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and I mean, when I do someone's chart, I can kind of tell them which planet is the leader, but they're all involved. So I took this council idea out of the astrology part of what I've been studying for 30 years and made them into a council so that I felt like they are actually more understandable, like personifying them with their own conversation. So that's the council counsels him to move forward. So remember, it's fiction. So there also has to be an element of, imagination and fun in it. But astrologically, you can know who your counsel is. And I'm going to be honest with you. Since this book came out, I'm getting a lot of people calling me to want to know who their counsel is and how it works. It's fun.
So that is a fair question. You said it's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun to.
It's fun for me to do that. Yeah, it is. And a lot of people have an aha moment. The main character in the book has Saturn, which is this really heavy planet. Well, not everybody has Saturn as their planetary energy. It might be Mercury, and that's somebody who's really into all types of communication. It could be, and I'm generalizing, it could be Venus. So then we have the focus is going to be more on relationships in a lot of different ways, whether it's work relationships, love relationships. So there's a lot to learn from that. And I just want to say very quickly, I told you how practical I am. I went into astrology as a total skeptic while I was in graduate school. Thought I went on a dare because I was having all these issues. Somebody else was getting something really good at it. I went to a local astrologer and he knew nothing about me. I purposely wanted him to know nothing. I told him my birthday, time, and where I was born. And when I sat down, this guy started telling me, you need to find a way to relax. You're going to burn out. And I was just like, okay. And I remember when I left there, I was just like, okay, I need to know more about this. Like, how do you know all that? That's how I got into it. Again, I'm very practical.
Sure.
Yeah. So
the problem solving that would be useful in a manufacturing environment, in a business setting, it's problem solving. That's good.
It is. And what it helps for me, like to know who my leader of my council is when it gets out of balance, I can call myself back on it now. I'm super structured, super disciplined. Yeah. Well, that's got me a lot of places in my life, but it was also the original thing going back to my favorite mistake, right?
Yeah.
That I needed a balance because I was going to burn out totally if I didn't.
Yeah. Well, as you sound glad that favorite mistake, that trip to Europe happened. I'm glad for you that hearing your story and how you got to be where you are today. So again, we've been joined by Rob Dorgan. The book is Awakening the Mystic. I'll make sure there are links in the show notes. How many words did you go to press with? Did you end up around 200?
It's 113.
Okay.
So 220 when I started, 175 on my own. The publisher said we got to get it down to 110. I got it to 113 and they were like, okay, we can do it.
And there's an audiobook available. Did you read that, or did you
I did.
have others? Okay.
And the audiobook is getting great reviews. So for folks that are really, they've got more time in their car, or they're not reading as much, I highly recommend the audio, and it's available, through wherever you get your audiobooks, it's available.
Okay. All right. Well, good. I hope people will check that out. That might be something might stretch my horizons a little bit. I'm more. I speak in the corporate language of, sometimes people say like, oh, you should have a personal board of directors, meaning like, a group of friends, advisors, people, but that inner council sounds like more the astrological version of that, perhaps.
It is. And that's exactly what it came from.
Okay.
Like, he asks questions, they tell him what's going on. They know more than he does. So they're this higher council for him to go into. So it has a practical application.
Yeah. Well, it's cool. Well, thank you, Rob. Thank you for being a guest and sharing so many things with us here. I think next thing in my day, I'm going to go do my yin yoga.
Good.
I fell off a little bit from it being a daily habit, but I remind myself, this feels good. I enjoy it. I get to do yoga.
Yes.
In the middle of the day. It's not that I have to. It's an opportunity. So I'm going to go take advantage.
And that changing that habit in your mind to I get to. This is good, and that takes a while to change it out. It's the same thing with sitting meditation. If it makes you feel better, why wouldn't you do it for 7 minutes a day?
Yeah. So there's that drive, and I appreciate the ongoing encouragement from my wife. Do your yoga today. I'm like, comes from a place of love. So I appreciate that. And
that's
Rob,
excellent.
I appreciate you being here with us today. Thanks.
Me too. Thanks for this opportunity, Mark.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.